Hello, so I'm just going to do a quick video regarding the sort of coronavirus vaccine stuff that's going on at the moment. Unfortunately, I'll just say in advance, I'll probably have to make the comments on this video either members only or sort of, stopped, because the problem is every time somebody talks about a vaccine, it's always Bill Gates and microchips sort of stuff. So anyway, the good news is obviously coronavirus might be near the end now, in the sense of we're in December, there's several approved vaccines now going out in several countries, and there's more vaccines with very promising data that are very close to being approved from all the trials they've gone through. So obviously completely safe, as the standard vaccines are normally safe because they've gone through all the trials. I mean, the thing is, you'll get lots of people saying they're rushed vaccines because normally it takes 10 years to make a vaccine or whatever. I suppose the thing is with a corona vaccine is that there's been so much money and effort put behind them. Whereas a vaccine for a disease, that's in a pretty poor country, not, affecting most of the richest countries in the world, doesn't really have much, incentive to behind it to be made. Whereas if you're a country that can make a vaccine that's going to make you literally billions or trillions, there's obviously an idea why they put a lot more sort of, effort behind making it. So there's several vaccines available. Now, regarding safety of the vaccines, as I said, most of that's been covered by man hours. Now, I think is it the Pfizer vaccine where they've said that there's a sort of autoimmune response problem from some people. And it seems basically like there's a list of conditions where if you have those, it's not safe to give you the vaccine out of sort of precaution. So what I'm assuming is going to happen with that is countries that have that issue are going to wait to vaccinate those people with one of the other vaccines that uses a different method of vaccination. Because obviously I'm not really clued in on how different vaccines work, but by the sound of it, some used altered RNA or something, and some use sort of the DNA from a cold virus or RNA from a cold virus that has a bit of something similar to coronavirus put on it, so the body makes an immune response against coronavirus. So there's that. But anyway, it apparently is going to be one of the biggest mass vaccination things in history, which I guess is a good thing unless you're an anti-vaxxer. And of course, I think it should always be voluntary, in the sense that if you don't trust the idea of getting a vaccine, don't get it. I mean, I'm quite, I don't really like the idea of the sort of health passport thing some people are saying about, which is the idea that, if you get a vaccine, you get given a magic piece of paper that lets you go places, but if you're not vaccinated, then you don't get it and you become a second class citizen. That's bad for obvious reasons. However, I think I can understand why some businesses, especially things like airlines and hotels, might want a system like that. I can't really understand it for supermarkets and restaurants and places like that. So anyway, my thoughts are hopefully we're near the end of this thing, even with the mink development and everything else that they had in few places now, haven't they? They had that first in was it Denmark, and then they've had it in Texas or some other US states as well, and some other countries. So hopefully it turns out the vaccines that work against the sort of SARS COVID-19 or whatever it is, the sort of famous one we've all been living with for a while, work against them. But as far as I'm aware, China's got its own vaccine now, Russia's got its own vaccine, a few other countries have got their own vaccines. There's the Pfizer one, is it BioNTech the other one, and there's the Oxford and, is it Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine? It's also pretty promising. I think a lot of the logistics of the vaccine now is going to be what temperatures they need to be stored at, how much they cost per vaccine, because obviously if you're in a developing nation, you're not going to be able to afford to pay, extortionate prices for vaccines for people. But hopefully this means within a few months, when enough vaccines or vaccinations can be rolled out to enough people, we're seeing the end of this thing. But I think this has proved, the lesson needs to be learnt, that there's always a threat from a biological sort of thing, and planning and preparation needs to be put in for it. You can't do the thing of, oh, it's not going to come along, so we're not going to plan for it. Because if you look at how ruined lots of economies have been from Corona, it could have been a lot better if countries sort of, listened to the scientists earlier and didn't ignore them, and had spent their planning time for diseases a bit better. Because I suppose in some ways we ought to be thankful that the mortality of this thing only ended up being like 1 to 2% or something. Because if it was as bad as 10%, 20%, we'd be in a much, much, much worse scenario. So anyway, hopefully that's the end. The light at the end of the tunnel now, and that'll be the end of Corona. But I guess it does prove the point of you need to plan and sort of predict these things, not just hope you can deal with it as quickly as possible when it comes along. Because as we've seen from Corona, it's probably made a Great Depression level of economic crash that's probably not, we're not going to even feel completely yet until I think a few months' time, when all of the sort of businesses that are struggling are going to finish struggling.